And obviously at this point, all the lads walk in, like all the other English guys, and they're just crying with laughter. And this afternoon just turns into like an absolute bender.
Hello amateurs, welcome to episode 14 of the Amateur Rugby Podcast, here to help soothe your Sunday morning hangover with some excellent rugby chat about the grassroots of the game. I'm your host Tim, and today I'm in Athens, where I'm preparing to go on Nomad Cruise, an incredible floating conference for digital nomads. Last week's episode with Dave Townsend was a real blast from the past for me. Rugby has changed a huge amount since the days when Towner was my coach, and it was interesting to hear it from Towner's point of view. Go and have a listen if you haven't already. But my guest this week is Ben Mercer. Now, Ben and I have never actually met, but he came with a very strong recommendation from a former teammate of both of ours, Geoff Griffiths. Ben has experienced all different sides of rugby over a lengthy playing career, and his story is one that I really wanted to share with you. This interview was recorded this week in November of 2019, and we talked about life on the fringes of the professional game and Ben's varied experiences playing in different countries. So please give it up for Ben Mercer. Ben Mercer, welcome to the Amateur Rugby Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, very welcome. So I just thought we'd start off by talking about where we are at the moment, because this is a first for the Amateur Rugby Podcast in that this is being done via a Zoom call. So I'm currently in Athens, about to embark on a cruise over the next couple of weeks. And where are you, mate?
I'm actually in Ericeira, which is a coastal town. It's about 45 minutes from Lisbon, up the coast a little bit, and it's a kind of old fishing place turned surf digital nomad hub.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. You've been telling me a bit about it, and it's quite interesting because the listeners might have noticed that I seem to be traveling every week to a different place, and that's because I am one of these new fangled digital nomads. And Ben, you're attempting the same kind of lifestyle, if that's right.
Yeah. So I've got to the point with my work. I'm working as a sort of freelance writer, kind of making content for different people and kind of managing digital products. And I've got to the point where I could kind of go on the road a little bit, and I thought I'd just test it out. So this is my first go at it, really, going abroad for an extended period of time and doing work, and it's been great fun. I've had a really good time so far. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Has it been productive as well? Because that's always the hard thing that I find, trying to get the balance of work and fun.
It's actually been really good because where I'm staying is a kind of guest house, but they're turning it into kind of co-living arrangements. There's been other guys and girls here doing kind of similar things, and people are going in and out. So in the daytime, people tend to kind of congregate and work, and then, whenever there's sort of surf to go and do, people jump up and go and do that. But for the most part, actually, it's quite a good work environment because people aren't working on the same thing, but you see other people working, and you think, oh, I better do something. So yeah, it's actually been quite good. Yeah.
Good. So you think this might be the future for you as well?
It's definitely, I'd be more than happy to do it again. I think like I've done it more by accident than by design, in the kind of right way, not moving around too frequently and kind of settling in and getting to know the people in the area a bit better. That's been cool. I think if I moved every week or something like that, or every 2 weeks, I might not get a lot done. Yeah, this has been good.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's get on to the rugby, shall we? I'd just love to hear a brief synopsis of where you started playing your rugby and the things that you did while you were growing up.
Yeah, I was born in Bristol and moved to Bath when I was really young, when I was about 7. So my first rugby experience actually at Clifton Rugby Club is about, I think I was about 5, and I didn't really like it. And then I played school rugby in Bath, and as soon as I played at school, I absolutely loved it. I played all the rugby I could, and then I ended up joining the Bath junior section, which was just, you could just go along. It wasn't kind of selective. Right. So joined that when I was about sort of 12, 13, and ended up getting to the academy set up with them. So I played all my young rugby kind of growing up around Bath.
Awesome. And then you went and you played for the Bath Academy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played. So yeah, I played for the academy, and after I left school, I applied for university, and I took a year after school. I kind of did the gap year thing, but I actually just stayed in Bath, and I trained for the year, and I ended up training with the first team for the sort of second half of the year, and that was good fun. I was kind of hoping to get a deal out of it, but one wasn't forthcoming. So so I went to university up in Newcastle, where I joined their academy instead. So.
And what position did you play, mate? I don't know, actually.
I was a centre or wing, so
Okay.
I'd get bunked on the wing in the A League, or when I played for the kind of younger teams, 21s and things, I was usually in the centre. So
yeah, cool. And so up to university, up in Newcastle, and did you play uni rugby as well, or just for the Falcons?
Yeah, I did both. So I played for the Falcons, played the A League for them. That was actually quite difficult to get a game for them, because they had all those England backs at the time. They had kind of Toby Flood, Matthew Tate, when he was really on the up and up. So it meant they had some really good players who are in the A League. So there's guys like Mark Mayer, Hoffler and Joe Shaw, who were kind of like really experienced players, had to kind of every now and again play in the A League, which I don't think they didn't enjoy too much. But yeah, we were. So I played uni rugby as well, and then later on, Falcons said to their academy guys, you tended to go on loan to local club teams.
Right.
So me and my flatmate actually went down and joined Blaydon, which was
it
was fantastic. Yeah,
Blaydon's a great club. I played them a few times, and it's always good to play them.
Yeah, it was good. So we tended to win our home games. I think because it was a long way to travel, obviously, for people. So they'd come up, they'd have to run across our car park, sometimes through a fairground. Then we played a game. They'd tend to come up on the day and then stay Saturday night and go on the piss. So I think, like, to be fair, most of the away teams, they're thinking about that. So we could kind of do them at home, and then conversely, we'd tend to struggle away. So we actually had 3 games in Cornwall at that point. So going all the way down there to play a National 1 game, it's like quite a trek. So I think they had like Launceston, Mounts Bay and Redruth.
Yeah, sure. But just going to Blaydon thing. Yeah, I played up there a couple of times, and it was the thing about it, because the pitch is miles from the clubhouse, isn't it? Like you have to walk about half mile to get to the pitch. And that can throw you off.
Yeah, you don't really need to do a warm-up. You might as well just get changed and just like do the jog out to the pitch and get started, because by the time you get there, you'll have done it. But that was really good fun, because it was a mix of there were guys from Newcastle Uni, Northumbria Uni, there were guys from the Falcons, but there were loads of like local guys, because it was a local rugby club, and actually it meant that you met real people who lived there. You didn't just meet other students, so it was quite kind of diverse group. It was really good fun, and get to know. We'd go out with the guys after games on Saturday sometimes, and kind of get out on the toon properly, rather than in some student nights. So it was always eye opening. A bit of a kind of hairs on your chest experience. But that's
any particular stories you want to share from those nights, or?
I don't know. We actually none of them were actually too ridiculous, but we one time, one of the Cornwall games, we actually got a tiny plane down there and back.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, which was incredible. And it didn't do us any good because we got hammered. But then actually on the plane on the way back, we were all a bit down. And the air hostess said to me, "Oh, can I get you a drink?" And I was like, "Oh, how much are they?" And she was just like, "Oh, it's all included." so then, the plane, which only had us on it, turned into a real rampage. And then, we went straight out after that. So that was like hilarious.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like playing at that level of rugby, you basically just got a private flight to Cornwall and back, and a night on the booze. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. No, it was great. And it was a very different experience to our university, like the university games. It's actually a really good level as well, because like particularly when you're a young guy, there were guys on loan from Prem teams, but they're also, like most teams would have some really like decent players. Some of them were kind of real clubmen, but there's every now and again as well, there were guys who are a bit older who'd played like a really good level of rugby previously, and they would just kind of training twice a week and playing on the weekend, like rather than playing full time. But it was a really fun league as well, because it's quite open and people threw around a bit. Yeah, it was good.
I think it's definitely the favourite league that I've ever played in as well. Like you've just described it well. There's a good mixture of different types of players playing for different reasons. The standard's good, but it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think, and because it's not people's livelihoods, I think it keeps that kind of the fun bit, or people don't tighten up so much, I suppose. And every team, like, you go to some really characterful places. So, you know, we went to like Wharfdale and you play, you know, in the sheepfield or whatever, but it's incredible like scenery. Or you go to like Southend and play in the industrial estate, you know. It's just like, you get this really amazing mix of places to go and play. And yeah, I had a great time. The second year I played at Bladen in particular, which is my last year of uni, had like a really fun year.
Yeah, cool. Okay. But from there you went down to Plymouth. Was it Plymouth next?
Yeah. So when I graduated, I signed for Plymouth. I actually, I'm sure we'll talk about him in a minute, but I went to meet I went to meet Graham Dorr at Tiverton Services. So I flew down from Bristol to Bristol, sorry, from Newcastle, and then got picked up, and we drove down to Tiverton Services to meet Graham and have an interview.
Is that where he had all his meetings?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It was quite surreal. So that was the first time I'd obviously heard a little bit about him, but it was the first time I met him, and we went down there, and he kind of put me through the ringer a bit, and then ended up, it must have gone okay, because he offered me a deal. And the way it's sorted out is, you know, at the end of university, my exams, I actually didn't have that many because there was a lot of coursework, and I kind of front loaded it. So I actually had a pretty chill end to my time at university. So I was, you know, really taking advantage of all that free time I had up in Newcastle. Coming into the summer, it's nice weather.
Was it actually, really? Even
yeah. It's actually like pretty sunny up there. Like okay. It was always weirdly in like sort of May and September. It was always like oddly nice. Everyone just piles into the beer gardens in Jesmond and really goes for it with the happy hours. But and then Plymouth pre-season started. Actually, I was like, I finish, and then I finish uni, and then pre-season starts in a week. But I was thinking like, this could be a problem. So I fabricated a holiday. And said, I've got this holiday organised, and I actually just went home and spent every day running and doing stuff, but, you know, on my own, rather than embarrassing myself in a sort of a new professional environment. So when I went down there, I was actually in all right shape, which was good. Like we did a running test, and I came out kind of not too badly. So that was a week well spent, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like actually lie so that you can do some own fitness work just to run off the beer that you finish a uni career with. That's great.
I just thought I can't go straight down there. I need a week, like, you know, I need a week buffer to just
clean yourself out.
Yeah, definitely. Going straight down there, I think, would have been a bad idea.
Okay, so how was life in the championship? Which, as I understand it, my short time there, it can be a real grind for a lot of players. How did you find it?
Yeah, it was a mixed bag. Like, I mean, the first year, because it was all new, it was really exciting, and we did really well that year for Plymouth. So we qualified for the playoffs, and that meant we kind of, we'd overachieved a little bit maybe, and that was the year where Exeter went up, and they kind of did Bristol in the final over 2 legs. So Bristol kind of beat everybody all year. We actually beat everybody apart from Bristol. So we beat Chiefs on Boxing Day at our place. So we got some really good results that year, and it was good fun. And then the next year we had our budget cut. And we had a few guys left. We had other guys come in, but our squad was a bit thinner, and it's just like, 'cause there's so many games, it's actually pretty demanding. And when the squad's thin and you're not as well resourced, it's tough because, you know, you're getting relied on to play all the time. And and you know, you just don't have that care that you'd get at a better team just through lack of resources. And it can be it can be a tough league. I think it's probably in many ways it's probably tougher than the higher level in the Prem, because just there's a lot of kind of onus on you to look after yourself.
Yeah, sure. The support network is nowhere near as big, is it? Basically?
Oh, no, absolutely not. I think and then the range of kind of the salary, you know, it's like some of them are really quite shocking, and you know, they're asking guys to, you know, live and breathe what they're doing, which is kind of fair enough because you're hoping for a kind of opportunity to step up. So for a year or two, you know, you might take that on the chin, but it's definitely a big ask, and I think there's a lot of guys who really ought to get more care. I don't know how that would happen necessarily. It's obviously a difficult problem, but I do think that it's something that needs addressing, particularly because like if you look to the England World Cup squad that's just gone out to Japan, obviously, I think there was some stat where it's 40 or 50% of them had kind of played their first rugby in the championship because they've been loaned out or dual registered or something. So the championship's obviously a pretty necessary part of our kind of development pathway, but it just gets kind of used and abused a little bit, I think. And I really think they ought to do something about it. But yeah, again, like as we all know, rugby's got a lot of kind of big financial problems. So it's definitely the kind of forgotten, I don't know what you call it, forgotten sister or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's true that, and I completely agree. I think it is really important part of the development pathway. One of my previous guests, Tom Lindsay, recognized that playing slowly at higher levels throughout his career has sort of lent him to get the experience to have a really good Premiership career. And I understand it's happening less and less now, where the young players are playing in the Championship. Is that the case from your experience as well?
I'm not sure. We didn't get too many dual registered when I was at Plymouth, but I had a year at Pirates later, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. But we had a load of guys come then dual registered, and three of them. So I mean, three of them are now like really good players for Exeter. So I mean, there's Jack Noel, who's obviously played a lot of international rugby, and there's Sam Hill and Jack Yendall, who's Jack Yendall's captain Exeter, I think. And Sam Hill plays loads like for Exeter. And they were all really good, but they came down. They had a great attitude, and So I don't know now because that was actually a few years ago, but I think in the Premiership, the cup competition seems to me to be a bit unnecessary. And if they kind of got rid of the cup competition, it was the kind of vague idea I wrote about a while ago, but if potentially they could move maybe the Championship over the summer, so it wouldn't compete with the Premiership, it would be a kind of development thing. You could get guys from university, straight out of university or in their university holiday, could come and play for the teams. And I don't know how you'd structure that with National One and how you'd keep the league, like in that respect. But there's definitely something to be done with the schedule so that the two don't compete and they complement each other a bit more.
Yeah, sure. That's an interesting idea, actually. I've heard a few ideas around this, but that idea of moving the Championship to the summers, that's a new one for me. So it'd be worth exploring for sure.
I think because there could be a bit more link up between the teams then, between the Premiership and the Championship teams. And like you said, with the young guys needing rugby, it's like, well, and say you spent your year injured and you kind of jump up fit in April. There's only games for you. But actually, if there was a sort of meaningful summer competition, you're like, okay, cool, go away. The games could be Friday, Saturday nights, things like that would be exciting. And people who wanted to watch rugby could go, see some competitive rugby that's like still a good level. But obviously, if you have the choice between, I don't know, going down to Pirates or Plymouth, or you can go and watch Chiefs, they're on the same day. I think like with all due respect to those teams, Chiefs is kind of more appealing to most people.
Yeah.
If it wasn't one or the other, if you could kind of do both, then I'm sure like loads of people would go down to those places because they're fantastic places to go and watch games.
Yeah. I think you could be right. Okay, before we get on to your year at the Pirates, I just want to, if you've got any stories about the legendary Graham Dorr, because most people that have played under him or met him have got something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how blue I can go with the language, but I mean, like I think before I went down there, Aaron Jarvis, who was in the academy with me at Bath, and he went on and he played at kind of Ospreys and Claremont and places like that. But he was like, oh, if you're training and he punches you, then punch him back.
Right.
And I was kind of a bit, I was like, is my boss going to punch me in a session? And he was like, well, he might. And then I was like, And actually, one day I was being held in a ruck and I was like, just, blindly kind of swung my arm backwards and actually cracked old Graham in the face. I think he actually respected it because it was like, he wanted people to kind of stand up for themselves a bit. So if he gave you a bit, you'd have to give him a bit back and then he'd kind of lay off you. Whereas I think if you just sort of grin and bear it kind of approach, he'd be on you. But we used to have these incredibly long team meetings which were just, they could be like incredibly painful. And he'd cover the whiteboard with, with notes. And then there's one time I remember quite clearly where we were watching it, and he just kept asking our forwards coach, Danny Thomas, to rewind the video. And we're like, it's one of those things where it's like nothing's happening in the video. So you're like, well, what's he looking at? And he pauses it, and he just says, "What the fuck are you doing down there, Clarky? You looking for fucking buried treasure?" Our hooker is lying on the floor with his hands on the back of his head, face in the mud. And I just burst out laughing. And he turned around, and he obviously wasn't joking, so I just quickly had to straight face it. But and he didn't see who it was. But things like that happened all the time, and I just found him hilarious, and he's actually just a great bloke. So I know you had Geoff Griffiths on here.
Yeah, he's going to be on in a few weeks.
Yeah. So he actually came to Jeff's wedding, and and it was great to see him. And he was just like, I didn't have any socks on, so he, because thought I was cool. And, he made me hold his beer, and he went to his car to go and get me some socks.
Oh, that's caring as well.
Yeah. He's like, warm socks. Warm feet, warm heart.
Cool. Okay, let's move on to the year at the Pirates. How did you end up there, and how was it?
Oh, so I was in after I left Plymouth. I thought I was going to go somewhere else, and it kind of fell through. And I ended up going out to Sydney for the kind of last few months. Well, the sort of back half of the season over here. Mm-hmm. So it was like the beginning of their year. The intention was to kind of be there for 3 or 4 months, come back and find a deal back over in the UK and play the whole year. But I had such a great time in Sydney. I actually played the whole year there, and then towards the end, so it was in kind of September, October time, someone from the Pirates got in touch and asked me if I'd be interested. At the time, Pirates, they just got to 2 finals in a row. They're really exciting. They were going really well. And I was like, oh, this is a real good opportunity. So I ended up coming back over to the UK and got down there in about October time. And it's just like it's one of those years where it's like hammering with rain every single game, like no luck whatsoever, like kind of still on the wing, barely seeing the ball, like for a lot of it. And we had some great wins and stuff, but it was a bit annoying. I felt like we had a really good squad and we had like a good mix of guys, but we came about, I can't remember, I think we came like 5th, or we just missed the kind of the playoffs in the end. It was a bit of a shame. But
it's an interesting thing about just thinking about it now, from your career, having played all the way up the north in like Bladen and Newcastle, all the way down in the southwest, you must have done some miles during your career.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's a sort of award for that, but yeah, like miles traveled, probably a real nomad.
Yeah, properly. Yeah. Sign of things to come. Okay, cool. Yeah. So was it after the Pirate season that then the opportunity in France came about?
Yeah, so I played the year at Pirates, and at the end of it, I hadn't had a great time, and I was kind of thinking, I was in my mid-20s, and I was thinking like, right, what's next? And I was a bit like, do I look for another deal? Do I, go back to the Pirates? Do I find a kind of semi-pro, like a kind of get up to London and, find a kind of National 1 team there and start working and use the rugby as a kind of, still play a decent level, but, like a lot of boys do with Richmond or Roslyn, people like that. And I was kind of weighing my options up. Completely out of the blue, I had a phone call from Richard Hill, the former Worcester coach. Mm-hmm. And he'd relatively recently left Worcester, and he'd got this job out in France, and he'd actually offered me a deal at Bristol when I'd left Bath back in the day. And he used to coach us because his son was a friend of mine from school, so he used to coach our Bath. Right. Yeah, like our Bath junior team. So when we were about kind of 13, 14, 15, not with the academy, but with the junior sides, and he was coaching professionally the whole time. But he phoned up and was like, oh, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, not a lot. So he said, oh, perfect. Well, why don't you come out to Rouen in Normandy? He'd just taken over, and I'd always wanted to go to France. I'd always had this kind of pipe dream It wasn't quite how I imagined I'd do it. I was always in, in my mind's eye, I was, playing outside Yannick Josillon or something. But like, I was just like, well, you've got to start somewhere. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So, I took I was talking to another team at the time. So over like a week, I kind of weighed up what I was going to do. And then I was like, well, no, let's go. So
it's not a hotbed of rugby in France, though, is it, Normandy?
No, not at all. So that was one of the kind of things, was they're these two kind of businessmen. They were the co-presidents of the team, and they had this kind of big plan to make Rouen into, like you said, because there's no other rugby clubs there. Like there are clubs, but no kind of big clubs, and that they were going to make Rouen into the kind of new rugby kind of power in the north of France. And it was actually a sort of relatively sensible idea, because if you can kind of annex that whole area, there's obviously Paris, where there's some, there's Stade and there's Racing, but you've actually got like a big catchment area, and you could turn it into quite a thing. And there's no, even like football in France, even though rugby is kind of more popular than it is over in the UK, really, like football's still the biggest sport, but in that area of France, it's not really like a big football team either. So you're not really competing that hard for an audience in some ways. So they had this idea to kind of make this, it was a real project, and that was kind of what they pitched to Hilly. So that's what he said to us. And there were 5 English guys. So 2 of them had been in France already, and one of them was half French, so they already spoke like fluent French.
Yeah.
And there were 3 of us new guys. There was me, there's a guy, Luke Cousins, who was a former like Bath Academy teammate of mine who I'd known years and years. And there's another guy called Joe Elliott, who was a bit younger, but he'd been at Bath as well while he was studying, and then he'd been playing for Rotherham. So the 3 of us moved over, and we were all kind of in the same boat, like learning French and getting into it.
Yeah. And did you like share a house or something, or what was the living situation?
Yeah, that was pretty funny. So me and Luke were quite happy to live together. So we got given a flat, which was it was actually not in a bad spot. It was near the gym, and you could cycle kind of straight like across into town in about 15 minutes or so. Kind of a real straight run. But then Joe, he was in a different flat, and he was with this Argentinian guy who was our scrum half. But that guy Carlos he was semi-pro, so he had a job, and then with one of the club's kind of affiliate businesses. And then so him and Joe were a bit kind of cross wires, because obviously after games we were like, we wanted to go out, and then this guy was like, well, I've got work, so can you get noise down? It's that sort of thing.
yeah.
There's a bit of a culture clash with that one, but
sure.
It was good fun. And so Rouen is split across the River Seine, which runs from the sea, goes through Rouen all the way down into Paris, and it's kind of similar in that it's split over left and right bank.
Right.
So Rive Gauche, or the left bank, is where we were and the rugby club was, and that's the kind of less salubrious side of the river, let's say. So slightly grimier side of life, but that was quite good fun. And then the other side, Rive Droite, is like the historical centre. So that's got a cathedral. That's where us English actually burned Joan of Arc at the stake. So that's kind of one of Rouen's big selling points, I suppose.
Selling point.
Yeah.
For historical monument, I guess. So what were your first few weeks like, moving to France, new people, new team, and what level were they playing at? It was quite low to start off with.
It was I thought I'd made a huge mistake, I mean, in the first kind of few days, and I did think like, it's going to get better, and you just need to kind of get into it a bit. But we turned up and we went straight to we had a meal, and then the next day it was kind of like, okay, well, today you're going to kind of meet everybody. And at that point the club was definitely not a professional place, and we were kind of brought there to professionalize it. Like obviously Hilly was in charge, and we were going to kind of be a bit of an example to other people. But so we're in kind of an empty gym. In France, like the gym is not there are people who are into it, but most of the other players were part-time, so it was kind of just us. The gym only opened at 9 a.m. We're in a public gym. It only opened at 9 a.m. It's like going to the gym before work. It's not something French people are too keen on. So there's sort of 5 of us in a completely deserted gym, kind of sort of doing what we wanted in a way. Like the conditioner wasn't too, he got like quite organized, but he wasn't too kind of authoritative or too bothered. So And then we had to kind of hang around and we went and train in the evening, and we couldn't train in our usual ground because it was they were relaying the pitch or something. So we trained in this like public park, and it was like a mix of the A and the B team. The standard was terrible, and like coming from the Pirates training sessions were quite kind of skill based and quite pressurized in a way. Like there were certain drills which were really kind of, they almost if you didn't pass and hit exactly, you know, where you're supposed to, that kind of wasn't a sort of acceptable rep, whereas this was just like a real mess in this park. And I just thought, like, what have I done? Like, this is a disaster. But then actually everyone was we kind of got into it with everybody, and to begin with it was hard to talk to everyone as well because we couldn't speak French, but some of the lads spoke English and were a little bit, and they quite enjoyed like trying to improve their English. So between us, we could kind of muddle through a bit so we could speak and they could correct us and vice versa. And then like, we had a kind of like a introductory, kind of an introductory evening with all the sort of sponsors and supporters of the club. And we're in this, like the smartest hotel in the middle of town. We had to come out onto a kind of, onto the staircase in this big courtyard and be introduced. And like Hilly speaks fluent French because he'd kind of learned before, and he'd coached in France previously as well. So he's like brilliant with the crowd, and he was kind of comparing it. And we'd have to come out and just give some sort of stock answers to these questions we'd prepared. But it's pretty nerve wracking, you know. There's like a big group of, you know, sort of the well-to-do of Rouen. And
sounds really formal.
Yeah, it kind of was, but then and it was kind of champagne and canapes. But then after that, everyone decamped to the Irish pub, and presidents are shouting everyone drinks, and then you're just like, oh, actually, I think maybe I've made a good call here.
In hindsight, let me think this through. Maybe this is going to be okay. After all.
And because we were so weird, because like you said, like rugby wasn't it wasn't a thing in Rouen, and so when people saw us, they'd be like, well, you don't look French, and what are you doing? And when they asked, we were like, oh, we play rugby for the team here. And they're like, for who? Like, you know, like, didn't even know there was a team. And but it meant that quite often we'd get invited to do like odd stuff. So like the club barman was this like real character, and he just took a real shine to us, and he couldn't speak English and we couldn't speak to him, but for some reason he thought we were good fun, and I think he was taking the piss out of us pretty mercilessly. But you know, we went to know, and he took us for this. Well, and our day off was a Thursday usually, and he was like, oh, you know, what you're doing, why don't you come for lunch at my like favorite pub? And it was this kind of countryside restaurant.
Right.
We're like, yeah, you know, well, that sounds great. Okay. He's like, I'll give you a call tomorrow. So Thursday rolls around, you know, we don't hear from this guy, and we're like, oh, right, okay. So we have our day off. Then Friday we do weights. We got skills training in the morning, so we go down to the club, and there he is. So we're like, oh, you know, we didn't hear from you yesterday. And he was like, well, what are you doing today? We actually had a team run like that evening, because you know, the guys who could make it, or the full-time guys, would kind of do the morning sessions, and then the team training sessions were kind of Tuesday, Wednesday nights, and Friday night would be a kind of team run. And or, you know, if you weren't playing, it would be a bit more running or games or, you know, whatever. But so we're like, well, we've got training later, but you know, we could go this afternoon. He was like, cool, great. Well, we'll leave here at this time. So we come back, and you know that someone's held up. So I go on ahead with the B team coach. He doesn't speak English either. So we drive for about half an hour. Like, it was pretty awkward. We get to this pub. He introduced me to Serge, whose pub it is, and this guy's, you know, big Frenchman, huge tash, and he just immediately gives me this blue cocktail which he calls l'eau de mer, which is seawater, and he just goes "consec," and I was like, you know, what's that? And "consec" is basically "see it off." So you know, like, so it's like, well, I don't want to offend this guy, so I just, you know, drink his house cocktail. And then he fills it up again. He's like, yeah, there you are. There's another one. So I was like, oh, right. So, you know, do this other one. They're making me drink. I'm still on my own at this point. And then and then like the place is packed. So there's like Friday afternoon, everyone's eating. And there's a guy playing. He's like playing a kind of, I think it's like a guitar, maybe, you know, like a kind of piano guitar.
Oh yeah.
And he's singing, and they're like, right, get up there. So I had to go up and sing like karaoke with this guy. So
oh my God.
Yeah, so me and him are singing Stand By Me to this restaurant of like French diners who are just like, what is going on? And the bloke's like singing and then getting me to join in and then dropping out. So, and I'm not a good singer. So
Right.
it's just like, it's really embarrassing. And obviously at this point, all the lads walk in, like all the other English guys, and they're just crying with laughter. And this afternoon just turns into like an absolute bender. So we have this huge meal, really traditional kind of French food. So we're having like beef tongue and veal cheek, and we're getting drunker and drunker. And then, you know, and in the end, he makes us drink this shot, which is called sorbet tonton, which is a kind of, it's 70%. It's an alcohol. It's an apple kind of spirit.
Yeah.
And they keep it in the freezer, so it doesn't freeze totally solid because it's so alcoholic, but it turns into a kind of jelly.
Yeah.
And it's just horrendous. So, so we have this huge meal. So it's 3 or 4 courses. We've been drinking the whole time. And then in the end, he's like, right. And then, okay, one of these, you know, then he's like, and another one for the road or whatever, another one. And then he's like, and one more. And then I drink this last one. I just cough. And then like, obviously the last like 2 shots, luckily not the rest of the meal, just like, bang in the bread basket. And they're like, right.
Oh my God.
And they're just like, right, time to go. So we kind of fold the kind of napkin over and we just leave. And then one of the kind of old boys from the clubs come and he drives us, and he's got a meeting. So he drives us to this like random stadium somewhere. And we're all just like drunk, stood around in this place, like with nobody there while he has this meeting. And then we go back and we've got training. So we're like, right, we've got to try and pretend we're not absolutely blind.
Yeah.
And I throw the ball to Luke, you know, he was our 10. I just pass him the ball in the warm up and he just completely, it goes straight through his hands. He sort of ends up hugging himself in a sort of comedy fashion. The ball just hits him, falls on the ground. But luckily we actually trained all right at the end and wasn't too bad, but everyone just knew we were stinking. And you know, it's the sort of thing you just wouldn't get away with in England. But it was,
yeah. And did Mr. Hill, did he sort of recognise the situation?
I think he was pleased that we were trying to culturally integrate ourselves. And as long as we didn't really butcher the session, then it was all right. So, we got away with that one at least.
Yeah, and probably your teammates that kind of bound you in a little bit with that as well, I'm sure.
Oh, they were loving it. They were just like, you know, these idiots, they can't hack a little lunch out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, funny. Okay, let's talk about the actual game in France itself. When I think about French rugby, and I guess in particular lower league French rugby, I just think of massive, massive men and brutal contacts and physicality. Is that what it was like, or were you kind of safely away from that out on the wing or in the centre?
No, it is. You're right. They do brutality, as they call it, is still that's still a thing. So they love the scrum. They love massive blokes. So I'd say in general, like everyone's less fit, but everyone is bigger. So there's a lot of huge guys. Mm. The only thing we would say is that, like, even with the team, that, you know, some teams did like to play a bit wider and, you know, a bit of jouet, as you know, that other French stereotype. But what I would say is kind of any team, no matter how bad, could have a funny 5-10 minutes where every outrageous offload they throw sticks. You're under the pump, you can't do anything about it. Like, they're suddenly world beaters. And like, this could be a team who are genuinely terrible, but they could have 10 minutes where they're all over you. And you're just like, yeah, it's incredible. Like, there is a kind of bit of a capacity for that, but you just don't know. You don't know when it's going to happen. It's not necessarily to rely on. Whereas we played a wide game, so we had it's a pretty recognizable sort of structure to people who watch, you know, decent level rugby. We obviously pulled it off a little less well, probably, but it meant that it was kind of good to get us settled into the group as well, because we're doing a lot of passing, moving the ball around. Everyone got to touch it. So, you know, some of the kind of the forwards, who are the older guys who are less accustomed to actually getting given the ball, were kind of loving it, because it was like, oh, cool, I get to do this. And, you know, once everyone kind of understood it a bit better, we actually had a lot of fun, particularly that first year. We used to sling the ball all over the place and score a lot of points. But, you know, we'd let in a fair few points as well. But yeah, true story. There was actually one of the first few games of the season. So we had a team come up from Beaune, which is like wine country, but they were kind of rock star. They had kind of Puma gear and they had this amazing bus. They had a few Kiwis and they kind of looked really pro, if you know what I mean. They had like a kind of pro setup, whereas we didn't have any kit. We all had like kind of club polo, but we're told to just wear jeans. And so we're stood around, everyone's drinking coffee from like plastic cups and smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
we looked like an absolute dog's dinner. And then we put like 40 odd points on them, gave them a real tuning. And then you're just like, there's something quite fun about, you know, not being very pro, like looking terrible and playing really well. Like that's a really good memory from the first year where, you know, kind of it all came together for us.
Yeah, nice. So, and you were quite successful, right, over the course of the few years you were there?
Yeah. So, I mean, that first year they were in Fédéral 2, which is technically the 4th division, but that's split regionally. So there are kind of the variance of teams is enormous. There are some teams who are sort of similar to us, but further down the line where they've been taken over by a wealthy guy. They had a load of good players and they wanted to kind of get up into like Pro D2 and, you know, eventually probably they want to push up into the kind of top 14. And then there are other teams that are kind of strictly amateur. So you'd have such, you know, one week you might play in like a kind of pretty kind of busy stadium. And then another week you'd literally play in a park with like nobody there. Yeah. But so we're in Fédéral 2 that first year, but they'd just been promoted before we got there. So we made the playoffs. And actually we were one game off getting promoted in that first year, but we ended up playing the strongest team. So we lost to them. The year after that, we got promoted, so we went up to Fédéral 1, and then that's a much better level, obviously. And then, so we had 2 years in that, and actually in the last year was meant to be the year we were kind of pushing up to Pro D2, but, you know, for various administrative and financial reasons, we couldn't actually do it, so we sort of wasted a year, which was a bit of a shame. But it's an interesting, you know, talk about it a little bit now maybe, but the kind of possibility for upward mobility is there in French rugby. So that there were teams in our division. So, I mean, that first year we lost to a team called Soya Angoulême, who people, you know, I doubt, you know, people in the UK would have really heard of. But, you know, they're now up in Pro D2. They were the team we lost to in the playoffs.
Right.
And actually, from my time in Rouen, and including Rouen now, as of the end of last year, there are 5 teams who are in Fédéral 2 who are now in Pro D2. So that's the equivalent of going, you know, from, I don't know, like what's below, you know, 1 below National 2 South, I suppose, and going up into the championship. So it's like 5 teams who have done that in quite a short period of time. Whereas, you know, like in England, I don't think that happens. I remember, you know, in the championship, well, when I played for Blaydon, Birmingham Bees were the best team in our division by a long way, and then the championship they were terrible. So they took a bit of a beating. But like I think in France, you know, I mean, it's a big thing now, isn't it, about moving from the championship to the Premiership, and they might want to ring fence it and stuff. Whereas in France, a lot of these teams do actually make it up to the kind of top leagues.
And why is that?
I think they're better resourced, like in terms of money. It's better supported. So Pro D2, for instance, is on TV. Or like most of the games, I think, are on TV, and they're kind of similar to what we were saying earlier. They don't clash with the top 14 games that much. So they play Pro D2 Thursday and Friday night. They don't play any games on Saturday, and then they play on Sunday. So they kind of stagger the games. So you could watch rugby every day, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. But like you can't always choose a top 14 game. It's like that quite often there's a Pro D2 game. And then even down to Fédéral 1, so that would be our national one. There are televised games.
Right.
Like, you know, not every week, but I don't think. But there are quite, it's kind of better covered, and I think like it's kind of better supported, I suppose.
Yeah, so I guess because there's more interest, it's getting more coverage, and it goes around in circles, right? The more money that comes into it, the more chance there is for these teams to move forward if they wish to.
Yeah, definitely. I think what has happened a bit over the last, and this is maybe a longer term thing, but the bigger cities have kind of been on the rise, whereas the kind of more traditional teams from smaller places have mostly struggled.
Yeah.
So I mean, when I was over there, Biarritz and Perpignan were like definitely Pro D2 teams. You know, they weren't really doing well in Pro D2 even, like for the most part. I think Perpignan been up and gone back down maybe since, but But, you know, when you speak to people in the UK, you know, Biarritz are always a Heineken Cup final kind of team. So you're like, people are shocked that they're in Pro League 2.
Yeah.
But actually in France, that mobility happens quite a lot. And I think with those teams from smaller towns, it's more difficult because they are less well resourced. Whereas now teams like Lyon, Bordeaux, you know, if you look at the table now, they're kind of pretty high up, and they're not traditionally that good, like in the grand scheme of things. So I think there is a bit of a trend towards the bigger places. And one of the other teams the team we were kind of always pitted against, I suppose, was Strasbourg, which is a big city.
Yeah.
And actually they always had, you know, they were always signing kind of pretty good players, and they had a similar kind of idea to Rouen. They've not managed it, but we were kind of neck and neck with them for a fair bit.
Yeah. So how did your time in France come to an end then? Was it just a case of end of the career, or what happened?
It was a bit, I don't know, it's a bit of a shame because, like I said, that was my 4th year there, and it was supposed to be the kind of big push to Pro League 2. And before we even turned up, so we'd all kind of re-signed, and they'd been kind of squeezing everybody because it was like, oh, look, you know, we're building the squad and it's the big year and money's tight and that sort of thing. And before we even turned up, they released the pools, and we weren't in the pool that could play off to get promoted.
Oh.
So everyone's like, well, what's going on? And when we got back there, they're like, oh, we're appealing and this is happening and whatever. And obviously that just didn't happen. So we were all there, and we'd recruited these other guys, and some French guys, you know, had kind of moved, literally the length of France from, you know, southern French teams up to the north. And then it was like, well, this is a pointless year of rugby. And I was 29, turning 30 that year. And I was thinking like, well, I'm not going to be playing. I don't really want to kind of keep playing. Like, I'm not like a top pro. I'm not earning a whole load of money. I don't want to be playing till I'm 35 and then have to think about a job. So I was like, this is a real, like, kind of stolen year in a way, which is a shame.
Yeah.
And then they started kind of paying us late and things like that. So it really took a toll on the sort of group a little bit.
Yeah.
Then later in the year, unfortunately I injured my hamstring, and then came back from that, injured my calf, and I kept pulling it, and I ended up I could barely get fit. And so I kind of really I literally limped out really. I mean, I got a few minutes on the field towards the end of the year, but it was a bit of a shame. And I just thought afterwards, I was looking into kind of different options to play, and I thought like, no, like I think you're better off trying to get into, you know, kind of take on the next thing and get on with work. So yeah, that was it.
Well, it sounds like you had a full range of experiences over there in France. And you kind of mentioned the next thing there, which, one of which is this book that you've written about it. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was kind of, like at university I did English literature. I've always loved books. I was always that guy on the bus who's reading with everyone kind of looking at him suspiciously. And I'd always liked the idea of writing a book, but I'd actually kind of never really made an effort, or never really kind of thought about how I might do that. And after I left rugby, I was doing different bits of work. So I was working in different businesses and kind of doing things for like, you know, a couple of months. I did a project management thing, but all the while I was doing a bit of writing. And I was not with any real goal in mind. I did like a short fiction course as well, like just to kind of explore things a bit. And after a while, I wrote a few things around rugby and retiring from rugby, and a blog asked me to write for them. And then I actually bumped into somebody, a friend from school, and she was ghostwriting for people. And I just kind of started developing this concept about writing about a bit kind of behind the scenes, basically using my time in France to kind of dive off into talking about different kind of issues around rugby, a bit like we have now. And and then she actually really, to be fair, gave me a bit of a push in the right direction. And right. Once I developed the concept, then I actually got through like the writing like relatively quickly. But it's been great. It's given me a bit of credibility with the work I'm doing in terms of writing for other people. But actually, it's been really good fun. I've learned loads doing it, and the people that have had a look at it, they claim to like it. So
okay.
That's been good as well.
What were some of the big challenges?
I think partly getting over that it feels a bit ridiculous to be doing it. It's kind of scary to put it out there, you know. And it's funny because when you play sport, obviously the potential for embarrassment is kind of immediate, and it's and people will let you know straight away. Whereas with this, it felt like, you know, that you wouldn't be embarrassed kind of immediately. If it was bad, then it would sort of happen elsewhere, and it was a different sort of sphere for me. So that was quite scary to begin with, to start like putting writing out there publicly. But yeah, as I went and as I did a bit more, I got a bit more confident with it. So to begin with, it was just like a volume thing. So when you do a first draft, you know, you just really need kind of material to work with, and just accept that it's not going to be that brilliant to begin with. But once you've got it, you can shape it, you can kind of make, you know, put a bit of structure into it. And so once I had a fair few words, once I'd really decided that this was something I was going to actually do, and I had a reasonable amount, then I thought, like, right, I'll crowdsource. So I went on our kind of WhatsApp group from Rouen, and I was like, right, I'm doing this, I've done this already, like what have I forgotten, maybe, you know? And then we actually had this really funny evening where everyone's texting all these like ridiculous stories. We're all sat around separately, all laughing and stuff. Really, yeah. And I mean, some of them are definitely unprintable. So I mean, like, I'm not gonna say that like all of those have made it in, but there's like that was really good fun. I think that's one of the things, like, and rugby at any level, like, it gives you that kind of camaraderie that exists for years after the fact. It's like, you know, you could call up your old teammate and be like, you know, when you're chatting socially or something, you could talk about something that happened maybe like 5 years, maybe even longer. Like me and my schoolmates, you know, they're still like, oh, remember when you know, were useless in that game or whatever. That still happens, and you're just like, that's why one of the nice things about rugby, I suppose.
Yeah, you take a nice little stroll down memory lane when you do things like this. And I'm finding a similar thing with doing this podcast, going back and talking to lots of old teammates and coaches and stuff like that. We constantly bringing up things that the other one had forgotten. And it's been a nice thing so far.
Yeah. I mean, like, what's been your favorite like interview you've done, like, off the back of this?
Oh, this to be honest, I've really enjoyed them all, and I couldn't possibly pick one favorite. Is that political?
I was just like, I'll have to put. I was like, I'll have to put you under the pump a little bit.
No, I couldn't possibly do that.
But you're right. But then, like, what was something you'd forgotten then? What was something you'd forgotten that somebody reminded you of?
What was it? Oh, there was actually this is a kind of a life lesson thing where one of the coaches taught us about, you know, just looking after the little things when you're getting off the bus. Just make sure you clean it properly and all that kind of stuff. So, I can't think of any that were specifically playing related.
That's very like Jordan Peterson, isn't it? Like, make your bed, you know, like
very much like that. Yeah.
You know, how you do anything is how you do everything, or the other way around. Yeah. No, I find that the kind of culture stuff around rugby is really interesting. And one of the things I did do, and it was a quick kind of interview project with some former teammates as well, which was like, I was hoping to maybe get some resources together for kind of for people who had stopped playing professionally and were now doing something else. So the first thing I did was speak to a few guys who were working in slightly like atypical jobs now. And then I spoke to a few guys who are still working in rugby. But it was interesting how many of them said, like, the things they liked about rugby weren't necessarily things that were a result of being professional. And it was all the things around, like what you're saying, like the kind of camaraderie, the history you get, the kind of network makes it sound a bit kind of businessy, but it's sort of true that, like, you know, these people end up all over the place. You know, you play rugby with somebody and then they end up living, you know, somewhere odd, and you run across them, or you go and meet them when you're there randomly, and it just gives you this amazing kind of group of friends. And even sometimes, you know, with people you used to play against and weren't even in your team, you know, it's like, oh, well, you know, why don't you look up so and so, like, yeah, they're over there. Like,
you have that shared history, don't you, even if you didn't actually know that person, you know, personally at the time.
It's always funny if you I mean, like, because I played for Plymouth and then I played for Pirates, so when I went down to Pirates, that, you know, technically that was a kind of derby rivalry, and then it's funny because you always just assume that, oh, well, they're dickheads down there, or, you know, like, you know, and then obviously it turns out they're exactly the same as you are.
So, exactly the same. So mate, how long did the book take you to write, I guess, and produce?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was kind of noodling around with it to begin with, so that was like very rough, and a lot of that stuff that I did in the first place like didn't necessarily make it in. But I'd say it's been about a year in
Okay.
terms of like concerted effort. So I did the first draft in a few months. So yeah, that was probably just over a year ago. I kind of was doing it, and I did it probably into kind of January or February, maybe. Then it was like being edited, and I was writing other stuff for it for a couple of months.
Hmm.
Went back with that, and then I was kind of exploring different kind of options around publishing it in the meanwhile. And actually, to be fair, like later on, because I've been doing more work, and to be honest, I've just been a little bit like worried about putting it out there. And I feel like I've benefited so much from doing it that almost releasing it didn't seem necessarily that important. But I think
Yeah.
obviously it is. It's like I'd love people to read it, but it's definitely partly I had to get over myself a little bit and get a bit brave and just kind of push it out there. So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Like it's been about a year, so it's pretty fast, really. And yeah, and yeah, I'm pleased with how it's turned out. It's funny because yeah, you've a lot of times kind of gone by, so you almost don't know if you did it again, you'd probably do it quite differently, obviously. But that's that, and I've done it, and actually I'm pretty proud of it, to be fair.
Good man, good man. Well, we'll tell people how they can get hold of it at the end of the show.
Yeah,
But
sure.
aside from that, is there anything else you want to say about the book or your time in France?
No, I mean, is there anything you want to ask me? I could talk about France for a long time. It was
Well, I'll
like I
tell you
said,
what, we'll let people find out in the book, shall we?
no, it was great fun. I mean, like the last year was like a bit of a shame. Particularly for me, but I mean for the kind of other lads as well, because it was a bit of a like wasted year in many ways. But actually, the whole thing was a great experience. I think is actually a lot more diverse an experience than you get in England, because I mean, like the place is obviously big, and when we had free weekends, we'd get around Europe and do a bit of sightseeing, a bit of partying, and that sort of stuff. But actually, in the team, there were guys from so many different places. And in England, when you play, and maybe not so much, maybe amateur teams, there could be a bit more of a diversity of person, perhaps, like depending on the kind of geography of the club. But we had, when you play in the championship in England, like everyone tends to be from England, maybe from the rest of the UK and Ireland. You get the odd guy, from New Zealand, or, Pacific Island guy, or, like South Africa, somebody like that. But I mean, in France, we had this ridiculously diverse group, where sort of we had Romanian guys, we had Georgian guy, we had all these, we had Fijian, Tongan guys, Polish guy in our first year, had Argentinians, we had a load of French guys, had some kind of local French guys and guys from like other places.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. We had a Czech guy. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just had all these like incredible, like diversity of experiences, both in rugby and in life. And that was why it's so, I mean, that's one of the reasons it was so nice. And I think, I definitely think if you're a younger rugby player in the UK, and if you weren't, if you're kind of, you're not looking like getting to the Premiership, or, like if that's what you're after, or even if you're a bit younger and you're studying, because I actually know a guy who did this when he was studying. He kind of took a year out and went and played for a French team. But I definitely say, you can use your rugby to go to another place, and actually you could have a really fantastic experience and go and kind of get to one of these teams, because actually in France there's so many clubs as well. Federal, so top 14, there's obviously 14 teams. In England, there are 12. Pro D2, there's 16 teams, I think. And then below that, then Federal 1, there's 40 teams. So
wow, okay, it's fast.
Yeah, there's 40 teams, and there's 40 in Federal 2. So I mean, even just in France, there's a kind of incredible range of possibility for people. If you want to be a bit brave and try and get over there, like you could really have an amazing time. And I think, like, with my kind of time in France, I'd say like 90%, 95% of it was really brilliant, and like, I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, awesome, mate. That's great stuff. Okay, let's move on, shall we, to the Rugger Law Bore section of the show. So, Ben, how would you rate your knowledge of the laws?
Mixed, I'd say. Largely all right. I can be done the odd time. So one time in France, actually, so the other team had a ruck on their own line, and suddenly one of our players ran around, just touched the ball down, and we scored. And I was like, well, what? Is he not offside? But apparently if the ball is on the line, like, it turns out that there's no offside. So, but that was a rule I wasn't aware of. So, I mean, even though I was like purportedly a professional, there are definitely a few rules that escape. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a bit nervous about this.
That was quite interesting you brought that one up, because that was actually one of the questions I considered giving you today. But however, I chose something different.
Right, okay.
And as I always say, this is just a bit of fun. I don't think anybody really knows the laws 100%, not even some of the referees maybe. But it's just hopefully everybody will gain a little bit from it. So with that in mind, Ben Mercer, it's time to find out if you are a rugger law bore.
Sir, are you sure that's correct?
Here is your question. A kickoff is taken directly into a strong wind. The ball travels over the 10-metre line and then is blown backwards, back over the same 10-metre line towards the halfway line. What happens next?
I'd like to think the answer's play on.
You're correct. The answer is play on.
Yes.
Yeah. I can literally see the relief on your face.
Like that appeals to my sense of the ridiculous as well. But it's like, no, you should really be allowed to carry on then if you've managed to do that. It's like in tennis when you can hit it over the net and it bounces back, then you win the ball.
Yeah. Were you confident with your answer? You seem pretty confident with that.
I would not claim to have been confident with that.
Well, but either way, Ben Mercer, you are a rugger law bore.
Yes.
Big moment in your life, I'm sure.
To get a badge, or is there any? You
can just stand up a bit taller, puff your chest out a bit more. That's all you need, mate. I think.
Or, go and ref some minis rugby when I'm a parent, and be a real Norse about it.
Oh, for sure. Okay, time to move on to the stash questions. So, what is your favourite bit of stash that you've ever received?
I actually had to write some of these down because when I started thinking about it, there's so many nuances to this question. But I really think actually for the most part it's my Bath Academy kit, because I was so proud to actually just be given it, and it felt like a real treat. That's the first time anyone gave me any kit for free, apart from maybe county rugby, So, and actually, even though they were maybe a less favoured brand, so it was Cotton Traders was most of our stuff.
Yeah.
But to be fair to them, there was a sweater which I ended up losing, but that was a great bit of kit. It was really comfortable and it looked quite good. And then there was a fleece, and I actually still have the fleece because it's perfect for a kind of if you're doing like a bit of grimy work in the garden, or if there's a horrible day training session, it was a good like mid layer, So I've actually still got that.
Amazing.
Oh, and actually, so sorry, there's one more. I traded for a La Rochelle. I traded with one of the French guys for a La Rochelle like long sleeve T-shirt that was super old school, and I actually really enjoyed it. So probably the fleece and the T-shirt are probably my two favourite bits.
Okay, nice. And what is your favourite kit of all time? So this can be any team, any era. It's broad, very broad question.
Oh, it's a real. You've really done me there. I think like the two that are like almost always brilliant. I'd say Toulouse and Argentina are the two. They're the two best. I'd say Argentina, they might just edge it.
Yeah.
I always had half of them were horrific. Some of the Stade Francais real fruity ones back in the day. Some of them they could actually look quite good on, I thought. And then the Bath one everyone goes for is the kind of old school yellow Adidas. But I actually I think the old Adidas Bath kit, but in the classic colours. That was always.
Yeah, Bath kit does look good. It's always pretty good.
I think it's like I've just got a preference for the cotton, the old school cotton ones. I think like not to play in, obviously, but I think they're better look.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and last stash question: what is your current stash crush? So that's like something that's just come out for the new season, or possibly one that was in the World Cup, or alternatively, if there's one that you think is horrific and it should be burnt. I'd be interested in that as well.
I think quite a lot of them are pretty horrific now. But I think the two that are pretty good, so the Jaguares from Super Rugby, because it's a bit different as well. It's kind of like something that's a bit, I don't know, they're doing something a bit more innovative maybe. And then there's a guy I know, and I mean, like, they've got kind of Ben Foden and people like that now, but the New York one is like a weird combination you wouldn't think figures out. It's like a blue and orange, but I quite like that one, the new, like, Rugby United New York, I think.
Oh, right. I haven't seen that one. I'm going to have to look that up as soon as we finish.
It's like a dark blue and orange, but like, you'd think it wouldn't work, but it's a real grower.
Okay. All right. Nice. Okay. Good stuff. Well, listen, mate, this has brought us to about the end here. So thanks very much for coming on the pod. It's been great to chat to you and get to know you. If people are interested in you and your book, how can they get a hold of you?
I'm very contactable on Twitter. So my handle there is wherebenmercer2, the number 2. But if you look me up, Ben Mercer, then you'll probably find me there. The book is called Fringes, Life on the Edge of Professional Rugby. And it is available on the Kindle store now in a digital copy. But the print version will be available on Amazon from December. So I'm hoping to be able to offer the pair as a bundle during that time. So hopefully with your listeners, we can get some sort of, we can get them the appropriate details when it's out and available. We can get them a little bonus there.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. We can do. I will make sure I link all of that up in the show notes. And when the book becomes available in hard copy, I'll let everybody know as well. And yeah, listen, mate, I just wish you the very best of luck with it. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks very much again to Ben. Hope the audio quality over this first ever remote interview was a high enough quality that you could enjoy Ben's story to the max. I've read the first few chapters of Ben's book, Fringes, and it's a great read with some awesome stories and insights about the game in France. What a great stocking filler for a rugby person. All the links to the book and Ben himself are in the show notes below. If you've enjoyed this podcast, you could like, comment, share and subscribe. But what I'd really like is if you mention it to someone in person the next time you're down your local rugby club. I'll be back with you next week when my guest will be my former Isha teammate Colm Hannon. I've got a lot of time for this giant friendly Irishman, and it was an absolute pleasure to travel over to Galway to interview him. Okay, I've got a few more things to do before boarding the Nomad cruise. 17 days at sea is a long time. Fear not though, I have already produced and scheduled next week's episode to be with you as usual, first thing on Sunday morning to soothe those hangovers. So until then, get out and play.